This is By Your Side, the podcast that cuts through the noise of new parenthood. No cliches, no guilt trips, just the real story. Practical tools and insights that actually help. I'm Katie, and I'm here to make sure you don't do this alone. Before we dive in, just a quick moment to say, if this episode speaks to you, please hit follow, leave a review, or send it to someone you know who's in the thick of it too. That's how we reach more new parents who need a little reminder that they're not doing it wrong. It's just hard. And don't forget, the conversation continues in the podcast lounge on the By Your Side app. That's where you can share your thoughts, ask questions, and help shape what we talk about next. All right, let's get into it. So in this episode, we have the lovely Gareth, who's agreed to come and join us. And something I always say, Gareth, is parenting changes everything. It is probably the most difficult thing any one of us will ever have to do in our lives. And I just wondered if you talk to your kind of parenting journey.
Yeah, so probably not the standard journey, I think it's fair to say. I had no children and I became a foster parent. So overnight, I became a foster parent to 3 children as a single parent, as a guy. And yeah, I don't recommend that people kind of go that route. It's quite an unusual approach, and it brings with it its own challenges, I think, but also parenting children with trauma, that's kind of a sort of a unique aspect of that challenge as well. And I was really unprepared. I think the system is still very, very bad at preparing people. It's almost an assumption, well, if you seem like you can parent, then you can probably parent children with trauma. And there is extra knowledge that's required. It's not just a kind of learn as you go along situation.
Yeah, and I think so interesting because I'd say that nobody's ready to parent. I don't think anything can ever prepare you. So to actually have to launch straight into it, as it were, and with 3, because the dynamics, speaking of a mum of 3, the dynamics are very different as well. That's huge. I mean, I'd love to know more about what were your expectations of what being a parent would be like? What was your kind of vision of what that would feel and look like in your life?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's really difficult because you know that if you have children from birth, that you are going to have some say in kind of what they're interested in and, kind of the things that they like to do and all of that. Whereas actually these children, I mean, my 3, when they came to me, were 10, 8, and 4. They already had their own lives. They already had their own interests and lots going on. And so I think you really hold back a little bit and you think, okay, I don't know who's going to walk through the door. I'm going to keep my mind open. Something I remember someone saying, and I'm sure it was kind of on a fostering recruitment, like a marketing campaign, someone saying, actually, there's this assumption that you kind of need to change your life to fit around the children when they arrive, but actually they're joining and coming into your life. I would say that now, almost a decade on, I don't think that's true. I think that you give up pretty much everything that you've got, and there's huge joy in that, and there's huge reward. I spend a huge amount of time at rugby clubs. I have no previous history of any interest in rugby, but that's what my boys are into, and you do kind of adapt to the life that they want to live. And so I think, yeah, that was kind of misguided, and it is something that I think about every so often, where it's like, yeah, actually, let the children come in and experience your life and your interests. There is an element of that, but I think it's like maybe 5%. And the rest is that you say, okay, what are you interested in? What are you good at? And how do I build our life around that?
That's so, and I'm kind of giggling slightly, Gareth, because I think there is that notion, isn't it, of a child will just fit into your life. You carry on doing whatever you're doing. And I think that's however you come into parenting. And actually, the act of parenting is and I love the word grace, the grace of seeing that individual, your child, as the individual that they are, and learning yourself to kind of meet them where their needs are at. So whether that's, if you're not into rugby, you kind of, you then, at least learn to understand and to be able to engage and support in that way, which is kind of probably one of the hardest things about parenting, of letting go of that, maybe that preconceived of, this is what I do and everything fits in to that. So I suppose for me, one of my questions would be, what was the hardest emotional change? Or I'll backtrack a bit. Did you have a perception? Did you have an idealized version of what you thought life would be like with children?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly thought it wouldn't be this difficult, as difficult as it was at times, and perhaps that's a shared feeling across the sort of parenting world with trauma. I mean, really, I think the challenge, and I see this with the work that I do. So I kind of advocate for therapeutic parenting and a better understanding of that, and deliver training and do all of these other things. There's this fairly common pattern where even people who've parented previously, they take on children through the care system. They foster, they adopt, they do, whatever it is. And these children come to live with them. They become part of their lives. They become their life. And, the general trend that I see is that those children are loved, unconditionally, absolutely loved. But then the adults really struggle to meet the child's needs. So they struggle to understand the behavior because it is far more complex than you would see without trauma in the mix. They struggle to know how to respond because sometimes, in my own journey, I really felt, I'm getting it right here, but I don't really know why. And then the next day, oh, I'm getting this really wrong, but I can't understand why and so there's that gap there. So I think that, yeah, there's that version of parenting that you want to do. And, you kind of, people are really lovely when you sort of let your neighbors and your friends and family know that you're going to foster or adopt or become a kinship carer. The response is really lovely. People say, oh, that's so incredible. You're doing this for a child. Then the shame of having had this child come live with you and you struggle to meet those needs and you can't understand their behavior, that's just such a really very, very lonely place to be. And that's a huge reality check then of, okay, well, whatever I dreamt that life was going to be, it's probably not going to look like that. It's going to need to look like something different. And I think, I had quite a challenge in convincing some of the wider, professional network around us that therapeutically parenting my children wasn't a choice. It wasn't something I didn't wake up one morning and think, oh, I'm interested in being a therapeutic parent. So I know what I'll do. I'll go and foster. Instead, it was very much the other way around. And yeah, that was kind of a different approach.
So I just want to unpack a couple of aspects there because I'm just really aware that certain terms, so trauma, what is trauma? It's a term that we kind of can all use and you might know and use it, but what does that actually mean? And what does that represent, Mike?
Yeah, it's a great question. And interestingly so, again, a decade ago, before I became a foster parent, I would say I probably hadn't heard the word trauma, certainly not used in this context of child trauma, really very, very unaware of it. Now I think it's far too overused and it seems to be everywhere. And a lot of the times that it's used, it's not being used appropriately. So what I would say is that, so I work across two therapeutic fostering agencies. So obviously this is one in England, one in Wales. These are children that have been removed from their birth family for whatever reason, but significant enough that they need to leave the care of their birth family and go into the care of the state. These children have all experienced trauma. There are plenty of kids that are outside of the care system that have also experienced trauma, but there are many that are sort of in this grey area in between. I think a really useful way of thinking about trauma is that it's not the thing that happened. So we talk about these traumatic events,
Yeah.
things that happened, moments in time, even if they're repeated over a long period of time. Trauma is actually the thing that happens within you. So you can have two children that, for all, intents and purposes from the outside look exactly the same home life, same, stability, same lovely,
Yeah.
3-bedroom house, all that kind of stuff. But actually what happens within them can be quite different. And what happens within you is heavily influenced by the people that you have around you, especially as a child, the relationships that are helping you form your internal model of the world, and all of this going on. So then when these adverse childhood experiences, these negative aspects happen in a child's life, it's what's going on inside that is influencing whether there is trauma that is then being carried forward or not.
That's so interesting. So the big thing I take from it is that relational aspect is key in that, and each child is different, and how they interpret things is different. So I'm just thinking there's so many scenarios that this can apply to, and I think I want to circle back to this in a way, but I just kind of want to unpick the other bit, which is therapeutic parenting. What does that what does that mean? What does that involve?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think that, so obviously two very much linked, but the point that you've made there about relationships is absolutely core. So, sort of an extension of what I've just said is that if trauma is relational, if what we're talking about is that trauma happens within the context of those relationships or lack of those relationships or instability of those relationships, then by default, healing is relational as well. That trauma recovery process is relational. So what we then see is that children that are brought into the care system or who are adopted and come and live with a parent who practices standard parenting absolutely fine, works okay. I think for a lot of kids, probably not the ideal form of parenting that I would recommend, but it's the way that's culturally and socially acceptable. And it's a loving form of parenting as well. I'm not talking here about neglect. I'm just talking about standard parenting that the majority of people, that's how I was parented, that's how most people are parented, and it's how most people choose to parent. That doesn't have relationships at the very heart of its approach. So, for example, one of the ways that we look at this is time in versus time out. So, for a child that doesn't have trauma, they can be sent to their room. They can be told, go and sit on the naughty step, or, actually, you're really winding me up today, just go to your room, out of my sight, that kind of thing. If you have that secure early attachment and that strength of that relationship, again, I wouldn't recommend this as a parenting approach, but most children, those without trauma, they can kind of get by. They can kind of survive that. They know that when that rupture happens in the relationship and they've been sent away, that their parent still loves them, that there will be repair on the other side of that rupture, and that everything is going to be okay in the long term. For children with trauma, that they've experienced rupture with no repair.
Yeah.
Their experience of the world is that adults send me away, they don't treat me well, and when bad things happen, there often is no coming back from that. And again, in particular for children in the care system and those that have been adopted, they have left their birth family. That tie has severed, and we may try to maintain some form of connection there, but quite often it's I think severed is an appropriate word. So therapeutic parenting has relationships at the very core of everything it does. So what we say is that, yes, okay, we need to see, certain safe behavior. We need to see, pro-social interaction and that kind of stuff going on that we want for any child that progresses into adulthood. But it can't come at the risk of the relationship. So if something has gone wrong, my priority is thinking, is the relationship between the two of us okay? Once we've established that, once we're both certain of that, then we can talk about what happened yesterday at school or, whatever it is. So that's the core element is that relational approach.
That's so and there's something that really stands out to me. It's that rupture and repair, because we are humans. We are humans as parents. And it doesn't mean that you need to be perfect or get it right all the time, because I'm just really conscious of that sense. I mean, and I will delve into a bit more for you, how much that's tested. We can each bring our own sense of trauma. We may have experienced trauma through our own childhood, which is then arisen or kind of surfaced even more in that parenting aspect. So I suppose for me, the beautiful thing you said was it's that rupture and repair. So it's not that you get things right all the time. It's that aspect of finding that relationship, finding each other again, and just making sure that the child, the baby, the child, the infant feels safe. The young person feels safe with you. Would that be the correct? Have I read that correctly? Have I interpreted that right?
Yeah, definitely. And I want to give credit as well here too. So a couple of people stand out in my mind. Ed Tronick, Claudia Gold, they both have a book called The Power of Discord, which is one of my favorite books. And for the reason that you've just mentioned here, because actually I think at times when we're talking about therapeutic parenting, when we're talking about the need for a very different approach for children with early life trauma, what we sometimes inadvertently do is pretend, make this, sort of make believe world where, every parent is the perfect parent and is constantly therapeutic and never gets anything wrong. I'm not that parent. I've not met that parent
I'm
yet. That
certainly
doesn't
not that
exist, I don't
parent.
think. And so actually, the rupture repair element there, it's one of the first things that I read where I was like, oh, actually, this kind of takes me off the hook a little bit here. It's saying, actually, rupture happens. That this happens when you live with kids who are going through puberty and adolescence and everything else that's going on. You're going to have the odd falling out.
Toddler
This is going to
tantrums,
happen.
the works. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so what it's saying, yeah, as you quite rightly highlighted there, is that, the rupture happens. It will happen for anyone. If we had the choice of taking it away from every child, we would not want to do that. That's not going to prepare them for the real world or friendships beyond the home and all of this kind of stuff. So instead, what we do is we focus on the repair. We make sure three things I always think with repair, especially when it comes to children with trauma. One is that it's adult led. So we can't, and I see this in schools a lot, well-meaning school staff will sort of hold their ground and say, I'll wait for you to come to me and apologize, and then we'll move forward. No, for children with trauma, their model of the world says that's not going to happen. So we need to prove them wrong. We need to show them that actually, when there's a rupture, there can be a repair. And I'll lead by example as the adult. So I'll come in and I'll say, do you know what? Yesterday wasn't a great day. I think I got a lot of things wrong. We're ready to move forward. So adult led is the first one. Fast is the next one, making sure that we don't leave those big gaps. Again, without blaming schools too much here, what I quite often see is that something will happen on a Monday lunchtime, and the detention for that is then Thursday lunchtime. That is a huge gap in between what's happened and the repair, or the sort of some sense of repair of closing that off. So yeah, adult led, fast. And the final one is authentic, that when we do these repairs, we need to try to draw from a place of authenticity. Children with trauma in particular are very, very good at
Oh,
detecting
yeah.
a lack of authenticity.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so if we're putting on a brave face and kind of pretending that it's all fine, then that's probably not going to work. Instead, we can be honest and say, do you know what? I'm actually really annoyed about what happened at lunchtime, today. But, I want you to know that we're both okay, and I'm ready to move on if you are. Let's, maintain that connection. And as I say, coming back to that concept of time in versus time out, it doesn't need to be complex. So what I'm saying to a lot of parents is, rather than sending your child to their bedroom and say, think about what you've done, and actually what they're going to do is sit there and think, nobody cares about me. I don't have anyone safe that I can turn to. Instead, what we have is we have time in, which can be something simple like, do you know what? I can see it's been a tough day for you. Let's watch a bit of TV together. What's your favorite show at the moment? Let's watch an episode together. Let's see what we both think of the latest episode. It can be that simple, but it says, rather than I need you to be away from me, it says, come a bit closer to me. I want to spend time with you.
That's so beautiful. And I think that can echo at any stage or any age, or regardless of what's going on for your child. It's about that self awareness, I think, isn't it? Of like, actually, I'm cross, or I'm upset, but I'm the adult in this. And actually, I need to sit with you and perhaps even explain that, and say, this is how I'm feeling, but it's okay. That we can
Yeah.
move through that. And that can happen even if your child is a baby, I think. It's because it's about the more that you can practice it and the more that awareness of yourself. I'm trying not to do like a self-regulation because it seems quite terminology based, but it's about just being aware of what's going on in your own head and your own emotions, and to be able to talk through that and being open enough to share that with your child. So I'd say, and this is something that I wanted to circle back around to, because I think becoming a parent brings that element of almost like a mirror. And I think sometimes we can talk about children pushing our buttons, or, the behavior being in a certain way. But actually, when you really drill down and analyze that, it's because it sparks something in yourself. So was there
Yeah.
any,
Yeah.
I mean, what was your experience? Because I think what really intrigues me, Gareth, is you were literally going, there's your family and there's three. So that would have been really highly tested. So what did your children help you learn about yourself?
Yeah, that's a lovely question. Yeah, I think so. I mean, what kind of building on the point that you've made, triggers is something that we think about a lot for adults as much as we do for children. And I would say that the behaviors that particularly trigger into me with my kids tend to be the behaviors they've picked up from me. So it's the
Yeah.
ones that I see where I'm like, oh, that's exactly what I'm like. That's really
Yeah.
frustrating. So that's a particularly sort of yeah, a particularly triggering for me. And as I say, we do a lot of work on that, so we kind of think, yeah, actually, with therapeutic parenting, quite often, if you were able to sit an exam on therapeutic parenting and fill out all the questions and get them right, then great, your knowledge is at a certain level. But actually, in the moment, where is it that you're not able to employ those skills? Because quite often it will be linked to some kind of trigger. There will be something going on there. As you say, a lot of people, we have to be realistic that a lot of people that choose to put their lives on hold or give up their lives to look after children that have experienced trauma are doing so because it's something linked to their life as well and to their experience. So, absolutely we need to keep all of that in mind. But yeah, I mean, I think, sorry, going back to the original question, you were asking me about.
It's just about what they've taught you. So I think, and it's really beautiful that you've said actually some of the things that irritate you the most are the things that are your behaviors too. So if you could bundle up and say, actually, this is what my children have taught me about myself. So I suppose there's two aspects. One is kind of what they taught you, which might be that reflection on the beginning of your family relationship. But now it's kind of almost, is there something, would you say, is the gift that they brought you? So kind of almost like, what did they unearth for you that you just thought, oh, okay, I need to realize this within myself, but also whether that's, yeah, a gift of some sort.
Yeah, I think, the thing that I've really learned, and it's sort of contradictory then with therapeutic parenting, because a lot of therapeutic parenting is about structure and routine and, making sure there's a plan. What I really learned, because that worked very, very well for us, but then I almost kind of went a bit too far in that direction and was too structured and too rigid. And like little things stick in my mind that we would go out for a dog walk and I'd think, okay, we've got this loop to walk. It's going to take us this long. And then we're going to have lunch. And we'd come across a rope swing. And obviously anyone with children knows you can't just walk past a rope swing. It's just not allowed. And at times I really felt like, no, hold on a minute, we need to stick to the structure. And you kind of take a step back and view it through children's eyes and think, well, why? Why are we doing that? Like, I'm not saying to give up all structure and routine. That's absolutely not going to work in the long run. But actually, the reason that you're doing that, I mean, I love the phrase discipline equals freedom. That actually, if you can have that structure, if you can have that stability, that then there is a space where you have that freedom, where you have that fun. My kids could not play together and enjoy those moments if it wasn't for all of the structure that's around. But if you go too far on the structure, then you don't have the freedom. And so, yeah, that's something that they really taught me. I mean, I think as well, in terms of a gift that they gave me, it's really understanding therapeutic parenting and understanding children with trauma. I feel like I could have studied this for 20 or 30 years, in a top education institution. I wouldn't have the level of understanding that I've got now. I was on a mission when my kids arrived to understand this. As soon as I got onto the right track,
Yeah.
I kind of read every book, I did every training course. I was like, yeah, okay, this makes sense. I can put this into practice. That's a gift that I've been given by other people, by loads of, professionals that I've been fortunate enough to know, many of them that I work with now. That is a gift that I now need to repay to other people. That's what, that's my day-to-day mission now.
Oh, that is such a beautiful gift. I think one of the biggest things I will take away is that sense of having a framework, but allowing the space between. And that's just so lovely. And that you, even if things feel like they're ruptured, it's the repair that really matters in that relationship building. This has been such a beautiful experience talking, and I love your passion for everything you do. And I'm going to drop all the links in the show notes about the work that you're doing and the difference you're making. And I just want to say a massive, massive thank you.
Thank you, Katie. It's been lovely. Yeah, thank you.
If this episode gave you something to think about, made you feel a little more human, or helped you feel a little less alone, it would mean so much if you could like, subscribe, or leave a quick review. It's a small thing that makes a big difference. And if you want to talk some more about what came up today or ask a question for a future guest, come hang out in the podcast lounge inside the By Your Side app. It's free to join and it's full of people who get it. Until next time, you've got this and we've got you right here by your side. Just a quick note before we finish. What you hear on this podcast is here to support you, not to replace professional advice. Everyone's situation is different, so if you're worried about your own well-being or your baby's, please speak to a qualified healthcare provider. You deserve support that's tailored to you.